It was the sound of his voice that stopped me cold. I had just closed the iron gate behind me, my arms full of groceries, my boots crunches against the gravel path that led from the old farmhouse to the woods. The late afternoon sun was warm, but the air still carried that early spring bite. And then I heard it, a soft, raspy whisper from beyond the pines. Leela, my heart jumped so violently, it felt like it burst my ribs. I froze, nearly dropping the bag of apple. I hadn't heard that voice in 5 years. Ethane was gone, presumed dead. And yet I turned toward the sound like a woman possessed. But that moment wasn't the beginning. The beginning was quieter, slower, the kind of beginning that creeps up on you while you are busy pretending you're fine. My name is Leela Jensen. After Ethane vanished 5 years ago, I stayed in a farmhouse he'd inherited. I kept the garden alive, paid the bills, and cared for his mother, Martha, who had a mild stroke a year after I disappeared. We clung to each other, refusing to drown in a sea of unanswered questions. The town whispered, but Martha never once blamed me. She'd say, "He's still out there, baby. I feel it in my bones." I had a routine that kept me from collapsing. 2 years ago, I took a job as a housekeeper and seamstress, a private estate owned by Miss Harrington. The pay was generous and the work was distraction. That afternoon, I finished early and decided to walk home through the woods. I was halfway through the trail when I heard it again. Leela. I turned, and standing just past the tree line in the filtered light was a man, thin and disheveled. His hair was longer, his face round, his blue clothes filthy. But it was him. Ethane. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. All I could do was stare as every cell in screamed. It's real. He's here. He came back, but then came the second thought, to quitter one. Why now? And why does he look at me like I am a stranger? I dropped the bag and staggered toward him, throwing myself into his arms. He didn't push me away, but he didn't quite hold me either. His arms hovered before settling awkwardly around my waist. Where have you been? I gasped against his chest. He just whispered, "Let's go home, please." We walked in silence. When we reached the woods, I called out, "Martha, Mama, you need to come out here." Martha saw him and froze. "Ethane?" she whispered, her lips trembling. "He needed just once. I'm real, Mama," he said, and his voice cracked. She let out a strangled cry and crushed to him, her frail arms wrapping around his neck. He buried his face in her shoulder like a child, and for the first time since he came back, I saw him cry. Later, after the tear had settled, we sat around the dinner table. Ethane picked at the soup I had made. I finally broke the silence. "Where are you, Ethane? What happened?" He looked at me then, his eyes looking onto mine. A flicker of guilt there. "I will tell you everything," he said quietly, "but not tonight. I'm not ready." I was too exhausted to push, too desperate to believe this was not a dream. That night, laying in my bed, I whispered to the dog. He came back, but even as I said it, I could feel it. Something was not right. It took him 2 more days to tell me. He started at work. Things were falling apart, shipment vanishing. My boss told me to meet a delivery truck at a new location. I went and someone hit me from behind. I held my breath, my heart pounding. When I woke up, I was in the back of a truck, my hands tied. They took me to a compound somewhere remote, surrounded by fences and barbed wire. They called it the farm to explain he was forced to work off a debt that he didn't owe. There were others too, he said, his voice softer. I met one girl, Clara. She was young but smart. She figured out the guard schedule and managed to send a message to her father. He's a doctor with powerful contacts. 3 days later, they raided the place. My throat was dry. "So that's where you have been with her?" No, he said quickly. They offered me a place to stay while the investigation was ongoing. But I told them I wanted to come home. To you and to mom. I wanted to believe him, but there was something in his voice that didn't quite land. He risked everything. He added softly, if it were not for her, I'd still be there. I stared at him, at the man I had mourned. He was here, but pieces of his were still missing. Something changed after he told me. I thought the truth would bring us closer, but it only made the silence louder. Ethan said, but he was a ghost in his own house. He didn't touch me the way he used to. He didn't kiss me goodnight. I told myself he was traumatized and needed time. But deep down, I know the man I'd waited for was not the same man who came back. It all fell apart the following weekend. I came home from the Ellington estate and saw two unfamiliar SUVs parked near the fence. Inside, laughter drifting from the dining room. When I walked in, I froze. A young, beautiful girl sat at our table. Holding Ethan's hand next to her sat her heavenly parents, Dr. Evan Foster and Mrs. Lydia Foster. And Ethan, he was not looking at me. He was looking at her. Dear sweetheart, Martha said, her voice trembling slightly. Apparently not late enough, I replied. Ethan finally looked up. Leela, this is Clara, he said. And her parents? They are the ones who helped rescue us. Clara smiled with the ease of a woman who belonged. I sat down, numb, and listened to her tell the story of their escape, her fingers gently tracing his arm. She wasn't being cruel. She was being honest, and that honest cut deeper than any lie ever could. When the table fell into a moment of silence, I looked straight at Ethan. Do you want us divorced? The words didn't tremble. He didn't flinch. I don't want to hurt you, he said. But I think it would be worse to keep pretending okay. I needed slowly. Clara looked down at her hands. Martha said nothing. I stood up, smiled politely and said, excuse me. I will prepare mom's medical documents. I turned away before anyone could see the tears which came not because he left, but because he never really came back. In the days that followed, the Foster offered to move both Ethan and Martha to a private medical facility, offering to cover everything. Martha looked overwhelmed but grateful. Ethan looked complained. I packed Martha's suitcase, keeping my voice even. Clara found me in the kitchen one afternoon. I hope you don't hate me, she said. I looked at her young, open face. I don't hate you, I said, but I'd like you to leave the kitchen now. She left without a word. That night, Martha confessed she was sorry and that she was just relieved her son was alive. This house is still yours, he told me. I won't leave you alone, promise. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove to my old apartment on the edge of town, which my Aunt Suzanne had been managing for me. The space was empty, but it was mine. Aunt Suzanne and my friend Mike showed up with second-hand furniture and groceries. We ate takeout on the floor and drank wine from mismatched mugs. It was not a celebration, but it was not mourning either. You going to be okay here? Mike asked. It's not perfect, but I need to space, I said. Aunt Suzanne smiled. Sometime healing starts with square footage. Later, Mike's friend Leo, a carpenter, looked on the door. He bought curtains, door, and a Tupperware dish of food. I figured you had need a decent meal, he said. Everyone talks, but I don't listen unless it's someone I care about. He helped hang a curtain and fixed a drawer. His smile was not expectant. It was simply unkind. After he left, Aunt Suzanne said, He likes you. I shook my head. But that night, laying in my old bed, I realized I hadn't thought about Ethane once in the past hour. That felt like progress. The next morning, I quit my job at the estate. That afternoon, Leo left a stack of flyers for our nursing assistant training course on my doorstep. A sticky note read, "You have already been doing this. Might as well get paid for it." I laughed out loud for the first time in years. Maybe the road back to my cell was not grand. Maybe it was lined with curtain rods, Tupperware and sticky notes. I signed up for the course. I was not whole, but I wasn't broken either. Just arranged. Leo stopped by often. Never too much, just enough. One Saturday, he left a pencil sketch of my apartment with a swing machine visible through the window. I pinned it to the fridge. I saw him again on a Tuesday. I had just finished a practical exam at the clinic. As I stepped on into the lobby, I froze. There he was, Ethane. There he was, Ethane. Standing beside him was Clara, her belly round beneath a soft grey sweater. They looked like a picture in a waiting room brochure, whole intact, expecting. For a terrifying second, I wanted to disappear. But then Clara spotted me. Her face lit up with surprise and hesitation. She knocked Ethane and our eyes met. It was silent for a moment. Then I smiled, not out of pain, but because I meant it. I gave a small nod and walked past without stopping. Not cool, just done. Outside, the wind was sharp, but at the end of the block, I saw him, Leo, leaning against his truck with two coffees in hand and that familiar half smile. "You looked like you could use something warm," he said. "You always know," I replied, curling my fingers around the paper cup. I listened. We didn't say anything else for a while. I didn't feel like I was standing in someone else's shadow anymore. I felt her presence. I turned to him, my voice low. "You ever think about second chances?" "All the time," he said immediately, "especially for them." We got in his truck and drove and as the sun sank, I rested my head against the window and closed my eyes. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for Ethane, not for closure, not for anyone to give me permission. I was free to begin again, just as me, Lisa, and finally that was enough.